Today we're going to be looking at
Got it.
Wait, I need to do this. We're going to be looking at soul, and a little bit more of it a little bit later. But now, yeah, the soul is the first one, and then the next session we're going to be looking at society and about the crisis in the care sector that we're having here in Finland. And the third one will be on soil and looking to support the alternatives to the industrial and monoculture farming that is happening here. And then actually there's the fourth one, which somehow closes the series by means of social dreaming, and where if this is more focusing on actions of caring actions to build a little bit more caring world, the fourth one is something where we're gonna somehow dream a little bit more abstractly maybe of where we would like to live. And a little bit of the motivation. I guess we're pretty familiar with the fact that we're living in an age of social and ecological crises, which has made us interested in care and having more caring relationship with each other and with all kinds of others. And we believe that it's possible to build a society and the institutions in the society that is more caring. And we hope to find better interspecies care practices. And the whole concept of this soul, society, and soil comes from a peace and environmental activist called Satish Kumar, who argues that the well-being of all of these spheres, the soul, the society, and soil, are linked to each other, and the well-being are dependent on each other. If we want to nurture one, we need to also take care of the two others as well.
And this division to these three spheres resonated with me because there's, like, I sense kind of a personal lack of care in my communities that I'm part of and personal relations. So then I started to think like do we know how to care of each other? And then again, and that kind of links to the soul. And then again, I witnessed frustration of my father, who's a nurse, and my sister, who's a kindergarten teacher, in their work when it's under-resourced. And I've connected that in my mind with this more far-reaching cultural mentality that caring is not even seen as a competence. And then again, I've started to feel that one reason to environmental decay that we are witnessing now and climate change is some sort of lack of compassion towards and lack of understanding of diverse life forms. That there is this kind of egotism and thinking that we are so special that we don't need to understand the complex systems that we are surrounded by.
And part of.
Yeah, so this is our first event. Let's get closer to the actual topic.
How do we do it? Here we go. So we're going to start by introduction and a little bit of the context of why now and who else is actually talking about these topics. And then we're going to dive into the topic of the day, the soul. And we're both sharing with Aliisa and me, we're sharing a little bit of the thinking, the conceptual and practical thinking that we've been doing regarding to the topic of self-care or the care of the soul or this well-being of the self. And then we have some time for questions and comments, and then we break for reflection. We can do it, you can do it alone or together depending on your preferences. And then we will end this evening with metta-meditation, which will be approximately 20 minutes.
Yes. So first, a little bit about the context, maybe for the whole series, but also for the session of today. Why now? Why do we care about and talk about care right now? I think there's, and probably all of us can agree that there's a lot of sorrow and anger and exhaustion and frustration and overwhelm, anxiety and numbness in our communities or in us, around us. And I think that's a sensible reaction to the suffering that we witness in the world. And for myself, I come to the conclusion that then a sensible response to this feeling is nurture and care. If we're feeling bad, then we need care. And if someone else is feeling bad, they need care. Or at least that's what I need. Yeah. Me too. I'm happy we agree on this. Then who else is talking about this? In activism, discussions about care and motivation to develop caring activist cultures has been surfacing the recent years. For example, Elokapina, so the Finnish Extinction Rebellion, has principles of non-violence and regenerative activist culture in their operations. So if I got it right, this means aiming to practice activism in ways that maintain the well-being of the activists as individuals and also the activist community. And our session today is closely related to this important and ongoing discussion. But there's perhaps a small difference in emphasis compared to what Elokapina is doing. Because I think that they focus on developing a caring culture within the already existing movement. And we are interested in developing a caring mentality more generally, even if you don't have a self-evident community you're acting with or within. And caring principles such as ones Elokapina is committed to are not only needed in activism, but in all areas of the society. So that's why also people who don't identify as activists should be, or I think should be interested. And also, yeah, that's it. So to continue to the topic of today, soul and self-care. I think the viewpoints that me and Samuli are going to provide today are some sort of a response to the individualistic and consumerist conceptions of self-care that are quite prominent at the moment. So we're trying to think of self-care in a somehow like soulful way. And in this first event today, Samuli and I will only be talking, but in the next sessions we are going to invite some guest speakers as well. But we felt that it's nice to start this in this first sphere, or the more innermost sphere of care, which is the self, by kind of introducing ourselves to you. We thought that that would make sense. And you might have been brought here by the questions that were there in the event description, or maybe not. But if you are, we won't be answering them directly. But I believe that in what we talk, there are answers to those questions, or at least cues that might help you answer those questions. In different contexts, cultures, and discourses, what I call caring mentality that I mentioned earlier might be also called, for example, love ethic, but concept by bell hooks, or loving kindness, which is a Buddhist concept. Man, I don't remember what kind of slides did we have there. What's the next slide? Oh, sorry,
I think we don't need to go with the slide yet.
No,
because
we
it's
can show.
Oh, so that's true.
Yeah.
My bad. Thanks for the care.
Yeah, heartwarming. Yeah, so what did I end up with? Loving kindness, yeah, in Buddhist teachings. So caring mentality, love ethic, loving kindness. There are many words for what I think might be the same kind of mentality, the same kind of practice. And in spiritual traditions of different kinds, practicing this begins from the self. So confronting one's feelings, thoughts, actions, impacts, and observing them with compassion is the prerequisite to connecting with others in all of their emotional complexity. So the title of today, refers to this spiritual tradition of creating a direct and compassionate and true relationship with the self. But for that, we need the care of others, and from that place we may also then care for others. I personally feel that soul is kind of a foreign and laden word. It has a lot of connotations to different institutionalized religions and esoteric traditions. And I noticed that to talk about, or like to think about soul and to talk about soul, I need to challenge my own reservations and explore acknowledging the soul. So if you sense any resistance to this word, soul, I urge you to challenge the resistance and kind of maybe be ready to understand something that you don't yet know. Yeah, so next Samuli and I are gonna share with you some thoughts about self-care, soulfulness and societal engagement. And this is going to be kind of a free but structured reflection on these topics. It's not going to be a lecture, but rather us, kind of pondering out loud and sharing what has moved us. And for us, preparing for tonight has been a chance to analyze and organize our thoughts around the care of the self, which is a topic that feels important and even urgent, but still a bit suspicious and fuzzy. And yeah, so first we'll share some concepts, and then we'll also share some practices regarding self-care.
Yeah, I'm gonna go first, and maybe to continue with Aliisa's words on the reservation of soul. I guess a lot of my insights come from Buddhism, and I think that I think that there is a lot to take from it, no matter what your affiliation with your religious affiliation or non-religious affiliations are. And when I was pondering this presentation, I think I came up with two words that are interconnected, that somehow helped me to organize my thoughts. And they are, if this works anymore, are connection and awareness. And a lot about the connection actually deals with building more deep and more committed relationships. And this means deeper relationships with myself, but also with others. And there's a brilliant book by bell hooks called All About Love, where she talks about love not being a vague feeling, but rather actually an action that has a lot to do with care. And she talks about love being something that you help the other person or yourself to grow spiritually or mentally, and that we should expand this love ethic to broaden it outside of this concept of just romantic love, and we should start to do things with it. Yeah, to broaden it. And the more I have done it in my life, expanded this kind of appreciation of other people and thinking my engagement with them in through the idea of helping them grow. I mean, it's hard. Relationships are hard, and somehow it still has made me question it a lot, but at the same time, I feel staying with the trouble is the thing that actually makes the relationship deep. Because we're living in a society where you can always just ghost anything. You can ghost anybody. You can ghost your friend. You can ghost your girlfriend. You can ghost your mother. You can ghost anybody. And I think it's promoted a lot in this country, in this society that we live in, and to actually take the time and to be with another person with all the difficulties. It's something that has made my life much more grounded, and it's one of the key elements that has actually grounded me into the fabric of the world, because I'm connected to other people, and then myself somehow shrinks because I become more, because I'm connected with other people, and these connections somehow I extend myself into these connections. And this takes me to a Buddhist concept that is often translated as interdependency or dependent orientation, which is somehow a perspective practice, which asks you to not think of yourself as a separate individual that is closed from the world around you, but rather you're embedded into the world, because we're linked with each other in numerous ways, and none of us exist in a vacuum, and our existence is always dependent on other existence. And I think the food here is a good example, because when you start to think and what the seeds that are growing into plants, all of these processes, and then when you're farming a weed, for example, you need the microbes, you need the mycelium to break down organic matter to actually make the soil fruitful, that anything can actually grow out of it. And all of this we're dependent on this. We never think about it, or we seldomly think about it, but I'm already linked to the mycelium and the microbes in the ground because of this. Because if they cease to exist, I cease to exist. And this is somehow very evident, then my existence is always dependent on other existence. And there's a lot of discussion going on about this also in sciences. And there's, for example, the biologist Aura Raulo, so evolutionary biologist or ecologist, she calls herself also, has been asking this, that should we actually watch the world as a block containing out of building blocks that somehow from which the world is created, or should we start to watch that we're actually so interlinked and the life is so delicately interconnected that actually should we start to watch ourselves more as a crossroad or a knot in a web rather than a singular individual? Because there's a numerous examples in biology, for example, with the microbes, that we're transporting them. When I touch her neck, part of my hand's microbes now is on her, and part of her next microbes is on me. And these microbes also affect our bodies and our mind and our thinking. So we always live in a symbiosis with these microbes. And there's actually more microbes, bacteria in our body than human cells. So we're always them. We're not never I. I just always laugh when I think about this. It's so funny. And that takes us to awareness. Or there's a bridge in the connection, the word connection, because how can I take care of myself if I'm not in connection with myself? It's a good question, right? Because how do I know how to take care of myself if I don't know myself? Think about that for a while. And I think it's, for me at least, one of the best self-care methods have been to sincerely and without judgment witness my own thought patterns, my inner voice, the quality of my inner voice, the tone of my inner voice, and the behavior, the way I interact with myself and with others. And when I've been listening to my inner voice, I've realized I'm super hostile towards myself. I have a very negative way of speaking to myself. I don't speak to anybody else the way I have spoken to myself. And I do it constantly. It's also a voice that never shuts the fuck up. And it's easy to run away from that because that's a very hostile person. I don't want to talk to it. But the more I get to know myself, the more comfortable I'm inside of myself and the more grounded I am in my daily life. And let's face it, the one person that I spend the most time with is myself. I can never escape myself.
For the rest of your life.
For the rest of my life. So it might be a good idea to make a good friends with yourself. And as we already heard from Bell Hooks, you can also, help it grow and love it. And at the same time, when I start to spend time with myself, I start to recognize what's meaningful to me, what kind of values drive me, and what things usually drive me. And this helps me to somehow prioritize my life and regulate my life a bit more. So I actually spend more time taking care of myself rather than avoiding the bad thoughts that go through my head. And a lot of this awareness has to do with emotional labor and becoming aware of the emotional blocks that I have been cultivating since my childhood. So what I have needed has been slowness and lessness. I have needed to cut down a lot, or not even a lot, but to mindfully cut down a little bit of my action so I have time to cultivate this kind of awareness. And there is a Ashin Teyanaya called Theravada monk who's been talking about this, that it should be actually something that we do regularly in a day-to-day basis, like several times a day, and we actually check in with ourselves. And it can be as simple as, am I relaxed or am I anxious? And this is it. You just do that very often. And the more often you do it, you can actually get away a little bit of the anxiety that you're feeling. Because if you're not aware, the anxiety starts to accumulate. And then when there is enough, you can sit down and you can do meditation, but you're so anxious, it doesn't really, you don't get very far. Believe me, I've tried that. But if you cultivate this kind of slowness and checking in with yourself, you can actually start to notice in meditation. For example, if you do meditation, you can start to notice the reasons of the anxiety. And there is an old Buddhist metaphor of this kind of pond. Our mind is like a pond that is very murky. The mud from the ground has risen up and you don't really see clearly. And unless you actually quiet down and sit the fuck down and let the mud sink down, you're very unconscious of what is happening. But if you practice silence and deep listening, you can actually let the mud sink a little and see a little bit more clearly. And this is very hard to do in our society in many ways, because we're living in a very fast-paced information society where, you know, it's extremely easy to run away from your bad feelings and to run away from yourself, because Netflix always gives you a next episode. It autoplays it. And if you're in TikTok or Instagram, the feed is never going to end. You actually have to mindfully do the exercise that, okay, I need to do something else. And believe me, they built the algorithm in a way that it actually is extremely hard to do. So this is also to fight against this kind of information capitalism. We need to also do a little bit of mindfulness, because otherwise, even I just downloaded Reddit and I deleted it because I realized that, do I need is there actually anything for me here?
Is this mindful?
Is this mindful? And it wasn't, and I realized I went off from social media like 2015 because I felt that it's, and I'm not saying that everybody should do this, but for me, I was a bit depressed and a bit burned out, and I realized that this is just like chunk. A lot of information poured into me, and I'm already burned out. I'm like, how can I process this? And then I just deleted it. And I'm sorry, I have no idea of the time. Maybe.
I also have no idea of the time because we started late.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's just ride the wave.
Very good, let's ride the wave. So maybe I'm also totally confused of this. But to wrap it up, there's a Zen teacher in America called Domya Perk, who has this new formulation of Buddhism called crisis Buddhism. So this maybe ties down a little bit of the concepts of self-care and the concepts of how do I do mindful activism so I don't burn out. And I've been listening to her podcasts and they have made a lot of sense. So I'd like to little bit tell you about what she's talking about. And the crisis Buddhism it's also a trinity. It has three things. It's very simple. The first one is bearing witness. So you actually look at the ills and the suffering that is happening in the world around us. And you don't close your eyes to it. You actually read the news so that some kind of compassion arises from you and this kind of sense of urgency that something needs to be done. And it also makes you informed. So you know what is going on and you can make more wise decisions when you need to take action. Which leads to the second part, which is taking action, which means that you do something tangible, something practical, usually some kind of activistic things that that takes away a little bit of the suffering from the world. And then there is taking care, which means that you don't do neither one of the two or both, but you just take care of yourself. You engage into activities that somehow revitalize you. And there's no golden ratio of how to do this, because sometimes life situations vary all the time. It might be that you're in a very difficult situation and the only thing you can do is take care of yourself. And that's totally fine. And that's necessary, because if you're in a bad situation and you can't take care of yourself, it's doomed to try to take care of anybody else. But then if you're bursting energy, because sometimes we are, and you can do a lot of action and a lot of bearing witness, there is two golden rules in this. And the first one is always be motivated by love. And she quotes actually Martin Luther King Jr. and his famous speech, which is entitled Love One's Enemy, where he's talking about that the only way to conquer things in this world and to conquer, for example, racism in this world is to love also the people who hate you. And he gives like reasons for this. And I like the last reason, which is that love has a redeeming power, which means that you cannot win a racist's heart by judging him or by shaming him, because they go on defense. But if you love them, they will listen, at least a little bit. And I think there's a lot of truth about it. And I see a lot of, also in activist circles, there's a lot of things that come from a good place, but are motivated with not love. And maybe that's also something we like to look at, that how would it be possible to love more, even when you're faced with something which feels in the beginning very, very unlovable. And that's why also Burke talks about goodwill. If you are unable to love, then you can at least have some kind of general goodwill towards everybody and everything, being that beings, any kind of being. And then the second rule is to expand the sphere of care and responsibility as far as possible. So you don't care only about yourself or your family, but also the environment and the societies we live in. That's it.
Yes. Will you change the slide? Oh, the drawing isn't visible, but it's okay.
What the fuck?
I hope the other pictures show.
I will. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And now we can just look at
The white screen. Yes.
So like I mentioned earlier, I've been going through a period of thinking the balance between how much care I provide and how much care I receive from others. And I've considered whether I care for others too much, commit myself to others so that I end up exhausting myself. And on the other hand, there have been times when I would have acutely needed care from the people around me, but it seemed that they didn't know how to care for me. Or I was outside their sphere of care that Samuli just mentioned. And then I came to a point when I thought that I should just learn to focus on myself. Like I should practice more self-interest and become more independent. I've become to this awareness of processes that I've been through and this need for care from others, and how caring for others makes me feel through practicing my consciousness skills. I've been training to witness what I feel and how I act in response, what kind of hopes and needs I have, what kind of inner voice I hear. And it's difficult for me to see how I've ended up reflecting this way, all in all. But I can point out a couple of landmarks that have helped me, which is popular psychology. For example, Meg John Barker is a British psychologist who makes amazing free resources that you can browse later on. They've done comic books about really important topics related to mental health and sexuality and so on. So popular psychology, big fan here. And another one is westernized Buddhist. Because I don't know any of the languages that I could go straight to the source, that I have to rely on Westerners interpreting the actual teachings. And one of the teachers that has inspired me and nourished me lately is Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away early this year. He was a Zen Buddhist teacher who developed practices of mindfulness and ideas about engaged Buddhism. And this means that insights acquired from meditation practice and teachings of the Buddhist Dharma
are used to contemporary situations of social, political, environmental, and economic. Thich Nhat Hanh thought that attending to one's own suffering and transforming it to compassion enables relieving others' suffering and supporting others who also relieve others' suffering. So also he teaches that everything starts from the self and from the connection with the self. And one speech of his I listened to on YouTube resonated with me specifically, and I would like to read part of it to you. In our daily lives, we are disconnected with ourselves. We walk, but we don't know we are walking. We are there, but we do not know that we are there. We are alive, but we do not know we are alive. We are losing ourselves. We are not ourselves. And that is happening almost all day long. So the act of sitting down is an act of revolution. You sit down and you cut off. You stop that state of being, losing yourself, not being yourself. You just need to sit down mindfully and breathe in mindfully. And in a few seconds, you connect with yourself. You know what is going on in your body, what is going on in your feelings, in your emotions, what is going on in your perceptions, and so on. You are home. And to take care of home. You might have left home for a long time, and home has become a mess. So going home means to sit down and be with yourself and connect with yourself and accept the situation as it is. I'm aware of my feeling of loneliness, of sadness, of fear, of anxiety. And I smile to the feeling of loneliness, fear, and anxiety. I say, my dear loneliness, I know you are there. I'm home. I'm home to take care of you. And you make peace with your loneliness. You make peace with your fear. There's a wounded child in you. You recognize them, and you embrace them tenderly in your arms. That is the act of going home, taking care of home. And later in the same speech, Nhat Hanh says, how can you connect with another person if you cannot connect with yourself? And I would ask, like Samuli was asking earlier, how can you participate in the world intentionally if you cannot connect with yourself? So social engagement or activism is often not connected or linked with mindfulness or practicing mindfulness, which emphasizes presence with acceptance of whatever is. So the kind of idea of mindfulness might be that it's quite passive, that you bear witness and live. But acceptance doesn't mean surrendering. There's a difference. It doesn't mean passivity, but it means active observing of events, feelings, thoughts, as they appear in your experiences. And the poet, writer, and feminist Audre Lorde has written that caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. So by caring for yourself, you are caring for the possibility of your ideas to realize and for your ethics to exist. Preserving oneself is particularly critical if the culture you live in is hostile to your identity, your community, your way of life. Like in Audre Lorde's case, she was a Black queer woman, so her self-preservation was an active it was active resistance towards or against the hostile culture she lived in. That's why it's pivotal to remember that self-care is a political warfare, also as a form of individualism and neoliberal capitalism. It's not only a warfare for those who resist them, but also the other way around. Because in this time and place, I recognize self-care as an individualistic project of improving oneself, competing with others. Also, self-care is a multi-billion wellness market. Self-care can become or has become a replacement for communal or societal or even medical care. Your struggles might be your own fault, and it's up to you to be able to improve your situation. Self-care has become, or might show as curling up to yourself. So you only care about the little things going on in your own life, and you're so occupied by that that you cannot take part in any political action. You're, optimizing your diet, for example, and that's everything that occupies your whole mind. And that also leads to withdrawal from community responsibility. Also, self-care has become justification for lack of accountability. The threshold to cancel or drop out from something is really low, and we live in a social, in a culture where self-care might be a valid excuse to abandon it. So I argue that self-care might actually be self-indulgence unless it's geared towards enabling the caring of others. Nurture and care is not equally possible for everyone. That's also good to keep in mind. Care in general has been feminized. It's considered as feminine or female ability and responsibility.
Yeah.
The Finnish novelist Eva Kiipi has written about this quite compellingly, and I will quote: "Men and boys have, from one generation to the next, been raised to undermine feeling, tenderness, gentleness, which has led to emotional energy and need for nurture to accumulate and erupt as aggression, and on the other hand, as activity towards things, nurturing motors, devices, and all kinds of gadgets. If women, as I believe, still possess the gentleness sustained by this culture of ours, then may them keep it alive so that it may spread to men too. If gentleness dies out of women, perhaps there will be no more gentleness left in the world." And even though, well, this is written in the 70s, so from today's point of view, we might criticize it for the binarity of the gender and maybe maintaining some gender stereotypes. I have interpreted this as a manifesto for nurturing. But nurture is a human right. But the tendency to nurture devices or gadgets shows this or expresses this like urge and need to nurture and care. But the only thing that is available in your, gender role might be this. And I think that's bad. So, nurturing as a human right. Through nurture, we connect with the world, and it feels good. It feels really good. It's empowering to realize one's capacity to care and to sustain life. It feels really powerful. And even within the crisis, like in Ukraine now, people who are helping others and taking care of others are coping better in the midst of the destruction. Finally, I want to share with you some recent personal remarks about care. I've been doing artistic research about care relations through sourdough baking. So in practice, I've been baking bread for myself and for others. And I've observed what kind of relations that creates between me, the sourdough, other people, the land. And I've made some really interesting remarks. First of all, I recognize that these different skills of care reveal themselves to me. Kind of what Samuli talked about as perspective practice. That I really, through this practice of baking, I've started to see the interconnectedness in a quite tactile way. So when I bake, I take care of myself. It's relaxing. The dough feels really nice. It's also rewarding. I learn new things. I get a sense of accomplishment and capability when the bread comes out of the oven. And it's good for my mind-body system, my digestion, because it's very nutritious. So it's a really practical way of self-care. Then again, I care for others. I insisted on baking for others. I just started baking without asking. And I started leaving the bread there, like, it's for everyone, it's for everyone. And then he like, in the beginning, asked like, so can I take it? And then little by little people get used to it, that they can eat it. And then they start to feel that, they need to give something back. And suddenly, like kind of by me just insisting on baking to others, this reciprocal care has started to evolve. Then again, the care of land through baking, because the flour that makes the best bread is made from grains grown in a gentle way, so practically organic. And also, they come through shorter supply chains. So I pay directly to the farmer. And slowly, I also learn to care for other species through baking. Because when I sync with the schedule of the microbes, I need to feed the sourdough regularly. I let go of full control. I actually, like the sourdough needs feeding every 3 hours if it's in room temperature. So I need to attend to it. That's the clock. So I learn humbleness in living with other life forms. I'm not in control. And this leads me back to this paradox that I started my part with about like, should I care less for others? Should I be more self-interested? For now, I come to the conclusion that I don't want to give up caring. I don't want to consider others less. I believe in nurture. And I want to demand more caring and more even distribution of caring. Yeah. Maybe show the next slide because we are less than me.
Yes. No.
Okay, so we promised that there will be conceptual part and then there will be practical part. So we gathered some activities that we consider as self-care and self-care that works for us. I also printed out this. I think this is probably by Rise Up, like activist resource. I don't know what to call it originally,
but this is like a little booklet of sustainable activism and avoiding burnout. So I remember I got this in my hands a few years ago, and this was the first time when I started to consider self-care, and that it's like crucial in activism levels. So I printed out a few of these. You can pick up one of those, and there is a list of things there. But these are our lists. Samuli did one first, and then I was so inspired that then mine became longer.
Then I got jealous, but I didn't have time to put more.
Yeah. But yeah, it was kind of like mutual inspiration from one another. Should we just read them out loud?
Yes, let's do it. You want to continue? Start.
No, you take a.
Very good. So I wrote exercise. It's one of the best way for me to actually to
Like physical exercise.
Physical exercise, because it numbs the mind. And
So great.
it gives me a break, and it's also it also releases hormones that actually gives a good buzz. And then there was forest strolling, deep stretching, art and entertainment, dancing. I do it less than I should, and intimate discussions.
And my list has also dancing. We also have danced together
Yes.
a lot. Active listening to music. So not background music, but actually like doing nothing and listening to the music. Cuddling without expectations for sex makes a huge difference. Baking bread, surprisingly. Taking care of houseplants and weeding in the garden. I might add to the weeding in the garden like gardening in general, learning to grow things.
Yeah, here.
Watching a slow-paced movie, so not like a kind of like Hollywood action entertainment, but like something that is slow and minimal that kind of allows you to think at the same time. Swimming and biking both have this repetitive rhythm. Mending things, engaging in a personal conversation, which includes listening, reflecting, and then again sharing. Slow cooking, meditation, observing nature. And one thing that is lacking from the list is actually reflective writing. I do that too. But we wanted to share these as inspiration for you. Because we talked a lot about these kind of like abstract concepts and kind of like, developing a mentality and so on. I wanted to provide you something more practical and tangible, like what might help in developing this caring mentality.
And finally, here are some things to read and listen. The first one is in Finnish, but I don't know, maybe it might be interesting to try to translate. It's a really nice text by Elina Tervonen about peace and
Rest.
rest and peace. And then the two Z's by John Barker are the ones here. They made also other zines that are free online on their website and can be downloaded. Then the activist trauma support booklet is this one, which is also as a PDF online for free. The speech from Thich Nhat Hanh is the one that I quoted. It's on YouTube by name Loneliness and the Illusion of Connection. And then Satish Kumar who inspired us to talk about soil, society, and soil. And finally, what Samuli ended his part with is Crisis Buddhism. There's a podcast. If you are interested in hearing more, you can listen to. And all of these should be, you should find these by Googling with what is here. It's all online. Thank you. Thank you. That's it.
Yeah.